Do we have NYSERDA staff on the phone?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Bruner from NYSERDA, and I would like to thank you for joining us today to learn more about how to apply for RES Tier 1 certification. NYSERDA is pleased to announce that the certification portal is open. Before we dive into how to apply for certification, we will start with an overview of the Renewable Energy Standard by Doreen Harris of NYSERDA, followed by Peter Keene of NYSERDA, who will briefly review the Distributed Energy Resource eligibility. I will then touch on the basics of certification, followed by Brian Gower of APX, who will walk you through examples in the certification portal to demonstrate how to register both operational and provisional projects and apply for certification. We will review what you can expect once you submit your certification application and where you can locate useful resources. If you have a question, please send a chat message in the message box on your screen, and at the end of the training, we will take a few minutes to review questions and provide answers. I would now like to introduce Doreen Harris of NYSERDA, who will review the Renewable Energy Standard.
Great. Brian, could you please go to the next slide, please? This is the agenda for the day that Marcy just reviewed. I will point out that there are a couple of resources with links listed at the bottom. We'll be touching on those links at the end of the webinar, so you'll expect to see those links again at the end. If you could go to the next slide, and the next, please. We're here today to talk about a portion of New York's Clean Energy Standard. The Clean Energy Standard was adopted in August of 2016, which codifies our State Energy Plan 50% by 2030 goal for renewables serving the state. Of immediate importance is that the Clean Energy Standard was established with two mandated requirements. The first is known as the Renewable Energy Standard, and the second is with regard to nuclear facilities, and that is the Zero Emissions Credit requirement. We'll be talking about projects which are eligible to fulfill the first requirement, which is known as Tier 1 resources in New York's Renewable Energy Standard. We've filed a series of implementation plans. There's been one issued already, and an order was issued in response to that implementation plan in February, which further refined eligibility rules and procurement rules by NYSERDA. There will be additional implementation plans and orders which will ensue as the program evolves over the coming years. If you could go to the next slide, please. Visually, the Renewable Energy Standard is, again, part of the Clean Energy Standard. And within the Renewable Energy Standard, there are two tiers of resources. The tier that we will be talking about today is Tier 1, which is new renewable resources, which are eligible assuming they meet both technology requirements, interconnection requirements, and commercial operation requirements, as listed on the right side of the slide. Essentially, we're looking for new eligible resources, and new is projects that have entered operation on or after January 1st, 2015. It's important to note that New York has expanded eligibility for Tier 1 of the Renewable Energy Standard to expand beyond our borders into adjacent control areas, assuming energy is delivered from those facilities. Part of RES Tier 1 is that NYSERDA is going to be entering into long-term contracts with RES Tier 1 facilities. We will be issuing our first solicitation for RES Tier 1 projects in April, and a prerequisite for eligibility will be to achieve Tier 1 certification through this process. Next slide, please. I had mentioned the case order 15E0302, which is a useful reference, and in that case, you'll see the August order that I had referred to. I'll draw your attention to Appendix A, which includes the eligible technologies for Tier 1. There also has been a Phase 1 implementation plan proposal, which was the subject of a commission order on February 22nd of this year. That implementation plan will be finalized and filed very soon according to the terms of the order. There's another case order that Peter Keene will be talking about in a moment, which is case 15E0082, which is otherwise known as the Value of Distributed Energy Resources proceeding. An order was issued on March 9th, which speaks to eligibility for Tier 1 resources under the Renewable Energy Standard, among other items. If you go to the next slide. Essentially, the eligibility for Tier 1 of the Renewable Energy Standard is very similar from a resource perspective to that of our former renewable portfolio standard, main tier. The eligible electric generation sources are listed here. The only change under the Renewable Energy Standard, other than the change in geographic eligibility, is the expansion of hydroelectric eligibility to remove a former 30 megawatt limit for capacity. I'll now turn the slide to the next slide, please, Brian, and I'll turn this to Peter Keene to discuss the details contained within the March order under the Value of Distributed Energy Resources.
Good morning. This chart kind of table that you see on the screen was actually included as an appendix in the order that was issued on March 9th in this proceeding on distributed energy resources. So the discussion of the matter begins on page 57 of the order, and I'm just going to explain what it means towards with regard to Tier 1 eligibility. And it's as limited to behind-the-meter resources. This is what it speaks to as behind-the-meter and Tier 1. What the order explains is, in order for a behind-the-meter project to participate in a NYSERDA RFP under the Renewable Energy Standard, the project's going to have to meet a series of different sort of eligibility steps. First is regard to interconnection, and there's a step 8 or step 4 of the interconnection requirements that you have to have completed. Depends on the size of the project as far as whether you're in the large generator interconnection or the smaller. But under the standard interconnection requirements, you have to basically have completed installation of the project. There's typically one more step after installation, which is for the utility to do a test. So you have to basically have the project completely installed. You have to provide notice of that completion to the interconnecting utility by March 17th. I should have started, you have to have completed step 8 or step 4, in other words, the interconnection requirement, at the time the order was issued. So that was March 9th. If you hadn't done that on March 9th, you're not going to be eligible. So if you've completed those steps, you had done so by March 9th, and you provided notice of that to the interconnecting utility by the 17th, you're actually enrolled in net metering, and you haven't received any incentive funding previously from NYSERDA, let's say under the customer-cited tier, and of course you meet the other eligibility requirements that Doreen talked about, vintage and resource type. If you meet all those, you're eligible to submit a bid into an RPS procurement or a CES, RES procurement. If you win an award, the project will be deemed eligible to create the Tier 1 RECs that you'd need to perform under the award. So that's the only way that you're going to get Tier 1 RECs. Having Tier 1 RECs is the only way you can sort of participate in an RFP under the Renewable Energy Standard. So in other words, you have to meet the vintage requirement, you have to be an eligible resource under the RES, you have to have completed by March 9th installation of the project, and you had to have notified your utility of that by the 17th. You have to actually be enrolled in net energy metering. This is the statutory net energy metering that's discussed in the order, as opposed to what's called phase 1 net energy metering, which is a part of the, that's the program that'll be available going forward to most projects. And you can't have taken a New York State incentive previously, for instance, under New York Sun or one of the other what we call customer-cited tier programs. The order does provide that NYSERDA is no longer taking any interest, ownership, or control over the attributes that your project creates. If it is a renewable project, you'll have the opportunity to register it in NIGATS, and you'll receive certificates reflecting the generation. You'll have to, proceed through all the NIGATS rules, reporting of, the generation data, et cetera, and the certificates that you're going to get have restrictions on them. If you look at our eligibility document, the application instructions to eligibility guidelines, there's a discussion of this on page 3. If you have any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next slide, please. And the next one, Brian. So NIGATS is the New York Generation Attribute Tracking System. We've mentioned it a few times so far in the presentation. NIGATS is the online certificate tracking system that records electricity information within New York State, and also will serve as a platform for applying for RES Tier 1 certification under New York's Clean Energy Standard. Next slide. A few reminders about certification. All applications for RES certification will be completed in the NIGATS system. Applications will be accepted on a continuous basis for either provisional or operational certification. Next slide. Certification is required for a facility to create Tier 1 renewable energy credits. Certification is a prerequisite for a facility to participate in NYSERDA's RES procurement as an eligible resource. And lastly, operating projects must be registered in NIGATS prior to completing an application for RES operational certification. Next slide. There are 2 types of certification, provisional and operational. So what does provisional certification mean? Provisional is reserved for projects not yet operating which meet the RES Tier 1 requirements. These types of projects affirm that they would meet the certification requirement if the project becomes operational. If approved, these projects would be issued a provisional statement of qualification, also known as a PSOQ. Next slide. Operational certification. What does that mean? That means that operational projects are in operation and meet all RES Tier 1 requirements for operational facilities. If approved, these projects will be issued a statement of qualification, also known as an SOQ. Next slide. The SOQ. NIGATS certificates minted after the SOQ date will be RES Tier 1 eligible, assuming that the associated delivery requirements are met. For facilities granted an SOQ date in 2017, if the SOQ date is on or before May 31st, 2017, the NIGATS certificates minted from January 2017 to the SOQ date will be retroactively made RES Tier 1 eligible if the eligible portion of the facility commenced operation on or before January 1st, 2017. And now I would like to introduce Brian Gower from APX, who will be demonstrating how to register and apply for certification in NIGATS.
Thank you, Marcy. Over the last few weeks, we've been working on modifications to the NIGATS tracking system to implement the ability to register operational and provisional projects and to apply those projects to RES eligibility. Your project management module is where you have been registering projects into your account. This project management module has been updated. The project module now contains 2 sections, operational projects and provisional projects. Under each of those sections, you will see new links. The first link says register new operational project. This is where you would go to register any project that is currently operational. Once the project has been registered and approved by the NIGATS administrator, you'll use the Apply for Operational Eligibility link to apply your project to the RES certification program. Once selecting that link, the project will be sent to NYSERDA staff for review. Once you've selected that link, you'll see the application status posted here under the application column of the operational projects section, or under the application status under the provisional project section. To register a project, you'll select the Register New Operational Project link, and this will bring you to a new project registration form. This form should be familiar to those of you that have filled out project registrations in the past. There have been some modifications to this form to include eligibility status and other RES applicable fields. This is an operational registration that has been filled out and submitted. The fields will look very familiar, but we've added some additional sections such as project class, which allows you to designate information such as market pricing zone and tariff type. We've also replaced the New York eligibility with a NYSERDA funding designation, where you can select the type of NYSERDA funding. The options are main tier, renewable energy standard, or customer cited tier, New York Sun. On the last page of the registration form, we now have a Tier 1 eligibility. Also, we've included the ZEC eligibility program. When registering a project, you'll be able to see the Tier 1 eligibility flag, but not select yes or no. It'll be defaulted to no for you. These fields are filled out by NYSERDA when they review your project. The provisional project registration is similar to the operational project registration. It has less fields to fill out, as there are some fields that will not be applicable to a provisional registration. Unlike an operational project registration, when you fill out a provisional project registration and submit, the provisional project registration will be automatically approved. I've provided an example of a provisional project registration that has not yet been submitted. So there's a one-page registration form for this provisional project registration. Once I press submit, the provisional project registration will be set to an approved status and will be eligible for you to submit that provisional project registration for provisional eligibility. You would do this by selecting the Apply for Provisional Eligibility. In the eligibility application for both provisional and operational projects, the only eligibility that you're applying for is Tier 1, and then you'll select the project. Only projects that are in an approved status will be listed. Once you've selected the project that you'd like to apply for eligibility status, you can go down and review the information that's posted from the project's registration. There will be attestations for you to select. And depending on the type of project registration, there will be guides for you to upload documentation. You can select in the eligibility, in the application, you can select the vintage type. If you're applying for the entire project, you can select new. If this is an existing project that you are only applying the upgraded portion, you can select existing and select the type of existing project registration. Regarding registering projects for existing incremental upgrades, Operating facilities that have or plan to implement incremental upgrades will need to register the upgrade as a distinct project from the original facility. A facility already in commercial operation planning an upgrade will need to register a new provisional project and apply for provisional certification for the incremental production. The capacity included in the project registration for an incremental upgrade should be the total capacity of the facility post-upgrade. Once the upgrade is complete, the upgrade project may apply for operational certification. The incremental portion associated with the upgrade of an existing facility is eligible for the RES if it meets certain requirements. The requirements vary based on whether the project utilizes an intermittent resource, for example, hydro, wind, or solar, or a non-intermittent resource, for example, biomass or fuel cells, to produce energy. Only the production resulting from the incremental upgrade will be considered eligible for the RES program. Once you've completed the application, you will designate these certification flags and press submit. Once you've successfully submitted the application, you will receive a message telling you that the application was successfully submitted. On your dashboard, you will see the eligibility status for that application posted in the project management module. When the project is submitted but not yet reviewed or approved by NYSERDA, the project will be listed as pending. Once it's been approved, it will be marked as approved. If for some reason NYSERDA rejects your application status, you will be able to fix the application if there's modifications that need to be submitted and reapply for eligibility. Import projects can also be submitted for operational provisional eligibility. Import projects are registered under the import module. Another change that was recently made to the NIGATS dashboard is to include the operational provisional sections under the import module for import projects that you register. Previously, when registering an import project to submit import claims on import schedules from other control areas, you could only view the import projects by selecting the import projects link. This link would display all import projects registered in the system, not just those registered by the owner. This has been modified so that under the import module, the import projects that your account has registered will be displayed on the dashboard without having to drill into the import projects module to see all import projects. This will easily give you access to view the application status for your import projects. You can register new import projects by selecting the Register New Operational Import Project under the Operational Import Project section of the import module, or select the Register New Provisional Import Project if the import project is not yet operational. Just like NIGATS projects registered under your project management module, if you would like to apply for eligibility under the RES, you can select the Apply for Operational Eligibility, and once you do that, you will select the approved import project in your account, fill out the application, and submit. And just like the projects registered under your project management module, the application status will be posted or will be displayed under the application and application status of the operational or provisional import projects under the import module. With that, I will turn it back to Marcy.
Thank you, Brian. Next slide, please. Now that you have seen how to submit the application, we will review what you can expect. Once the application is submitted and deemed complete by NYSERDA, NYSERDA will have 30 calendar days to review the application and issue a determination. You will then receive an email notification that your application has been reviewed with a link to NIGAS. You will then click the link for this facility to view NYSERDA's official decision, which has been uploaded and will be appended to your account. As mentioned previously, for operational projects which are approved, you will be issued a Statement of Qualification or an SOQ. For provisional projects which are approved, you will be issued a Provisional Statement of Qualification or a PSOQ. If denied, you will receive the reason for denial and will be able to resubmit. All communication is generated via email and sent to the contact person listed at time of application. Next slide. The NYSERDA CES website has been updated to provide eligibility and guidelines instructional documents to walk you through the application process. You will also find step-by-step instructions on how to use NIGAS to register operational and provisional projects and apply for certification on the site, as was just demonstrated. In addition, the Biomass Power Guide has been revised to reflect the Renewable Energy Standard and can be found on the RES Tier 1 eligibility page. Please visit the sites listed to download instructions and documents and familiarize yourself with the process. We will now briefly pause to see if there's any questions that have been asked through the chat message box. We just checked the message box. There's been no questions that have come in during this session. So if you do have additional questions after this presentation that have not been addressed, please contact us directly. Next slide, please, Brian. The contact information is listed on this slide. This concludes our training. The certification training video will be posted on the website, and thank you for joining us today.